Welcome to the Open Window Institute, a new view to discovery. This is our first podcast, and I'm happy and proud and honored to be welcoming Robin Austin and Lee Reffel, co-authors of the new book, The Software of Your Mind.
Oh, yes.
How changing your state of mind changes everything. So, gentlemen, please tell me, what is this book about?
This book is basically about no matter where you are in life, whether you feel a state of depression, anxiety, or just maybe even suicidal, that through physical, mental, spiritual health practices that we discuss in this book, you can optimize your brain and mind to turn your life around.
What about you, Robin? Why did you write this book? What's it about?
I knew that I had, ever since I was a wee little one, I knew that I was running into a lot of trouble. And I knew that I was facing kind of difficulties that come from from challenges to just having a positive self-image and having a strong sense of, hey, I can do this, and hey, I'm going to be all right. And and throughout my life, I had to cultivate those things for myself because I faced so many challenges that made it difficult for me. And so as I was going through all of that, I'm reading everything I can find about philosophy and self-help and religion and all these things. And I'm constantly saying, well, if I can get this right, then that smooths out everything. If your brain is operating the way it's maximized, if you can maximize the capacities of this magnificent and amazing instrument, then you can smooth out your whole life because we have the capacity to create. We are creative forces. That's what we really are, is a being that is creating all the time. And so this was sort of the focus of where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do with my life. And I, made all these different approaches, music and poetry and all these different things, painting and all these things that I've done in my background and history that sort of were preparing me to get to the point where I could really organize and teach these things. And then one day my good friend Lee says, hey, Robin, I'm working on a book. I'd like to write this book about the software of your mind and how by changing your state of mind, you can change everything in your life. I was like, oh, well, perfect. Because that's something that I've educated myself about for more than 50 years. This is something that's been very close to my heart and that I've really applied myself to understanding. And I've got stuff that I can contribute to that. It's going to be fantastic. So I would love to do that. And so that's sort of the genesis of where we came together to write this book. And he knew about software and I knew about the mind. And we both had these various aspects of things where we'd gone through things and created these challenges we had to overcome. And so that's kind of the answer to the question.
Well, thank you. That was a great intro there. What gives you the authority to write this book?
Very good question. So I'm a native of Denver, Colorado. And as far as what gives me the authority to write this book, I've been through a lot of self-transformation in my life. I was very tiny, scrawny kid that got picked on a lot. And I turned to physical fitness when I was 12 because I was tired of getting bullied. And I seen how much it made a transformation in my life, with my appearance, which gave me self-confidence. And don't get me wrong, this is not like it changed overnight. It took me decades of just working on myself. But I've developed a lot of mind disciplines that have really helped shape my life, and it's helped me train other people to optimize their mind when it comes to overcoming their fears. I'm a customer service representative and trainer of 19 years, and I have a proven track record of helping people that are totally uncomfortable on the phone, because that's where I started, to transform them to building belief in their capabilities. And by mentoring others, I was also teaching myself at the same time. And I turned to self-development in my early 20s. Now I'm 44, but I turned to self-development, read books by Les Brown, Tony Robbins, Jim Rohn. I've just really absorbed a lot of this material, and by practicing what they teach and combining it with what I've learned and helped others with, I felt that it was a great idea to write a book that could help others that are struggling with depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, because I felt all those things myself. And that's where I come in, and that's why I'm qualified to write this book, because of based on what I've been through. And I've decided to have Robin join me because he's been through a lot of trials and hardships, and with his spirituality and wisdom and various factors of the mindset as well, I knew it would make a great team.
So how long did it take you to write this book?
It took just under 2 years to actually write it, about a year and a half to have like the writing figured out, and then just final editing and tweaks, and then things like that to get it uploaded to Amazon and so forth to get ready for distribution.
Did you have a writing coach, or did you do this totally on your own?
No, honestly, when I first started writing this, I relied on Robin heavily for like just the making my ideas pop more. And I've had help from my family and everything. But see, the thing is, we have very different writing styles. I'm very short and to the point. Robin's very elaborate, but we've also learned how to do the best of both worlds, because I've taught Robin certain aspects about writing on just maybe decoding the writing, because a lot of times the wife or his my mother-in-law Luann will be in the room listening to the book, and she's like, I don't get it. And Robin and her like, oh my God, why don't you get it? Why don't you get it? What's about it you don't get? And I'm like, well, what he's trying to say is this, and it really ties into this. And I can just kind of decode the message. She's like, great, write it like that. But that was months and months of that. So I've learned to be more descriptive, and he's,
That's what is your mother-in-law's name?
Luann.
Luann, right? Okay. And Robin, what gives you the credibility to write a book like this?
Well, really, when I was a very young child, I used to see auras, and seeing auras in those days was not like seeing auras these days, because in those days, auras were something that virtually nobody ever talked about. So the fact that I was having this experience of, I'm seeing I'm seeing the auras around electrical wires. I'm seeing the auras around people and animals and plants. And one day I met this girl who was kind of the coolest girl I'd ever met. She was about 6 years older than I was, and I thought, if anybody can see this, it's probably her. So, because I'd learned early on that nobody was seeing this, so I thought, if anybody can see this, it's probably her. I said, so one day I'm watching what I know now, and it's going to sound strange if you don't really buy into this stuff, but what I know now was nature spirits, which were fairies, is the accurate term, that were playing around this tree. And I said, isn't it beautiful the way the lights are playing around the tree? And she just gave me this look that made it very clear, I don't see whatever it is you're seeing, and I think you're insane and need help. And I'm a little kid, and I just was like, oh, this is the coolest person I've ever met in my life, and she's got no idea what I'm talking about. So I began to, it panicked me. I thought, well, she obviously thinks I'm crazy. Am I? I don't know what crazy is. I'm a little kid. And so as I'm going into my early teenage years, I'm already reading everything I can find about how the brain works, about psychology, about various cultures and religions. I'm educating myself about psychic discoveries behind the Iron Curtain and the and Inuit shaman and amongst the Eskimos and the Native American shaman and magic and ceremonial magic, not the kind you do for show. And so I'm, you know, and I've already got a grounding in Christianity that's fairly deep. My grandfather was a Presbyterian minister, and my mother was rather devout in that respect, but she was also very open-minded. So when there was a political situation that my parents didn't like in the church, we started shopping different churches, and I had gotten into a Quaker church, and we would go in and sit down and just be quiet. And if you felt moved to speak, that is when you would speak. And so I sort of learned about the Holy Spirit moving through people and how it can move through anyone. And so, and then we also had a very theatrical family. I was raised on stage from the time I was 8 years old. I started doing plays with my family, with the local theater. And so I had learned how to, I was learning how, my father was educated by Uta Hagen, who was a very highly qualified, perhaps the premier acting coach in the world at the time. And she had taught him a great deal, and he was raising me with this knowledge. My mother was an opera educated singer. And so I had all of this background in performance that was inculcated into me at an early age. So my father used to take me out, and we'd sit and we'd watch people. And he'd say, "What do you suppose is wrong with that person?" And they'd be walking along, and I'd give them a little nutshell evaluation. Well, their body language, this, their, you know, when people would talk, I'm listening to the micro tremors in the voice and learning to detect whether they're telling the truth, whether this is falsehood, whether they're crazy, whether they're sane. And so all of these things are going into building who I am. And I'm also facing tremendous challenges because my parents have a distinct preference for my younger brother when it comes to this one's the brilliant one, you get out of his way. And so I have this complex working on me in my own mind that's making it challenging for me to think positively for myself and about myself. And I've also got all this complex stuff going in and working out because I'm trying to figure out, okay, am I crazy? What is it to be crazy? Is this that I'm seeing real, or is it some fiction that I'm creating in my mind? And if it's real, who else sees this? Who else perceives the world in this way? And what can be done for me to be able to communicate to people what I'm seeing in a way that they're not going to think I'm crazy, because I don't think I'm crazy. I think I'm sane. And so all of that sort of qualified me to be able to see the world in a unique way, that, and then to take those things and understand the effect that I may be having on the people around me, and how to read them and understand maybe where they are. And so I sort of, you know, just the problem that I have is that all of that education, I mean, I'm studying Tibetan mysticism and Jewish Kabbalah and, you know, Christian mysticism at an age when most kids are like, let's jump bikes and stuff. And I'm doing that too. I mean, I've got my skateboard and I'm very athletic. Learned trampolining at an early age and used to do it every day. And, you know, so there's all these things going on, but all of those things sort of put me in a position where I had all this knowledge and all this wisdom about all these things, but it was difficult for me to put it into ordinary language so that everyone else can sort of get on with it and say, okay, yeah, I get what you're talking about. And that's where working with Lee and working with the people around us, working with Luann, and her going, I don't get it. What are you talking about? And me going, oh, this is frustrating. How do I get this across? And we created something that takes these very kind of esoteric and high concepts, but translates them in a way that is pretty accessible to just about anybody that wants to read it in 8th grade level, you know.
I love what you just shared, because that's what struck me when I read the book, the accessibility of this broad and meaningful esoteric journey that you have been on, and how accessible these resources are, the way that you and Lee have laid them out. There's something very attractive about this style without being didactic, or you are sharing the wisdom that has allowed you to get here, and in such a way that somebody who has no context, like maybe your Luann or people like her who don't have these awarenesses are saying, oh, well, that's interesting body of information. It's accessible. And if I'm interested, I could now go look into that because you gave these great outlines of summaries of these various schools of thought as resources. Like you, I also grew up seeing all kinds of dimensions that the people around me weren't seeing. And again, I spent a lot of time in the woods because that was the most natural place for me to be where
Yeah.
everything was in harmony. But back in the house with the siblings and the parents, they didn't see what I was seeing. So there was always a sense of I'm an outsider, just kind of watching me in this other reality. So I really resonated with your story and with Lee's story of feeling alienated and bullied. I had the thick glasses and the same kind of thing. So I really celebrate your book. And when I read it, I said, this is great because they're going to be people that have no interest in the woo woo, but if they're interested in personal stories, you guys just suck them with your personal stories, and then their minds are they're going to discover something new, which is why I thought, wow, this is opening a window in people's minds, and I love the book, and I'm telling everybody about it. So I'm so excited to be the first guy to be interviewing you guys about it. Before I get into the kind of technical of the book here, I'm I'm curious about the relationship you guys had as you started working together. What kind of problems did you have? And what was the invitation that you put to Rob says, hey, look, I'm working on this book. How did you frame it? What did you say to him to get him to get involved?
That's a great question, Jesse. So I'm a full-time software tester, and you watch how software behaves. Sometimes it's very consistent, sometimes it's not so consistent. And it's on, equipment where it's hooked up TVs and all that stuff. But what really drove me to write this book is looking at everything that I've been through in my life, because I went through a coaching certification program with you. Actually, it's how we
How
met
we met, yeah.
back in 2021. But one of the questions was, what has been your biggest challenge through your life? And for me, it was mindset. And when that question was assigned to us and we had to provide an answer, that hit me hard because I looked at everything that I went through, growing up, feeling alienated, bullying, even suicidal. But I also knew that I had a lot of strength because I overcame a lot in my life to get to where I am now. And I was thinking, you know what? I'm a software tester, my mindset, and I just put two and two together. I'm like, software of the mind. Software, the title was different. It used to be the software of your mind, how getting in the right state changes everything. And we're like,
Mhm.
nah, that's not good enough. So we polished it up, created the title. But to make a long story short, I was like, you know what? I've always wanted to write a book, but I do think I need an accountability partner to help me see it through. And I'm thinking Robin's the perfect person to help me see it through because even through our relationship, I met him back in 2006 because Leah was on Plenty of Fish. That's where I met her, and Robin helped her set the profile and all that stuff. Leah's my
All right.
wife, but to make a long story short, met Robin in 2006. He came out here to Denver. We've known each other ever since because he's known Luann, Leah's mother, for like 60 years now. He met and they've used to be childhood sweethearts. They both got married. Both spouses ended up dying and they got reconnected back in 2005. And then a year later, um, after both their spouses die and everything, I meet Leah on Plenty of Fish. So we were connected that way. And but when I knew that through our relationship, since we knew each other about, you know, 15 years at the time, I knew that he would be the perfect person to write the book with because of all of his wisdom and how much he knew me and how much I knew his background. So that's how that came apart. I asked him, hey, would you like to write a book with me? It's about the software of your mind. And immediately he was just like, I would love to. So we originally started it remotely because he was in North Carolina at the time before he moved to Denver permanently, or to Aurora, I should say. But we're working remotely, writing a chapter a week. Originally, the book was going to be a short book about like 75 pages or so. But we realized quickly after busting our butt to try to get it done in like 6 weeks, we're like, you know what? This is not going to be the book we want it to be if we're going to put that tight a deadline on it. So long story short, we elaborated on it, got the family involved, and it just turned into the book that it is now.
You guys are so completely different. And here we have this combination of Lee's rational capacity to help you articulate what you're expressing, and you're resonating because you're both fives in this frequency that's the same. And I'm just thinking how the universal consciousness wanted this message to be delivered. They had to hook you two guys up. And then here I am as okay, I want to bring out what you have to say. And so it's just the moment, the mystic moment of it all is wonderful, because I think what we're doing here is what my mission is to help anybody realize that you are all mystics. We're all here on a journey to experience the mystery of being alive in these bodies, with these scenarios, these karmic stories that we've inherited or chosen, or however you want to look at it. And it's up to us to decide what we're going to do with it. How are we going to respond to it? It can either overwhelm us or it can transform us. I love the idea, turning the shit in our life into fertilizer for our blossoming,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that we can grow the fruit. And, that's an attitude as opposed to, oh, woe is me. And you both radiate with this exuberance of life. I got to ask Robin, what was it like for you to be working with Lee? Did you have a sense of constraint? It was like, well, wait a minute, going to keep up with me? Or tell me about your experience. What was it like when he approached you and he made the suggestion? Or how did it feel? What was it like? What was the interaction like for you?
Well, I'm going to be frank.
Please, I'd rather you be Robin, but you can be honest.
my initial feeling, I wrote and self-published a book of poetry sometime back, and write music and songs, and I had worked very hard throughout my life to develop a capacity to speak well and to sing and to phrase language in a way that is persuasive but also enticing, because that was who our family was. It's like, if you're not entertaining, then get off the stage. So I sort of had this pressure growing up, and my younger brother was extremely glib. He was so well spoken, and I was not. I was more slow of speech, and so I was constantly getting put down and goaded by him, and it made me just so determined to become as eloquent as I possibly could. And so when Lee approached me, I thought, well, I really don't know about Lee's writing enough to know that he's going to be able to handle this and make it into something really top notch. But if need be, I can always carry this thing because I've got the eloquence and I've got the words and I've got the vocabulary. So yeah, let's go for this, and it is about a subject that is very close to my heart and that will nourish people, and that it's something I've been preparing for a long time. And I do believe he's got organizational skills and technical skills that will make a very valid contribution. So even if I have to work with him a while on the on the language, I think it'll make a great project. I think we can write a wonderful book together. And so as I entered into it, I really was, kind of like, well, even if he can't carry his way, but it was kind of a delightful surprise to me that he really could carry his way. He's writing some very excellent. He's doing some excellent work, and he's digging very deep into himself to find the truth of what it is to deal with extraordinary difficulties and very challenging circumstances that just practically took him apart when he was a kid, and he had to recover over and over from these extremely challenging and difficult circumstances. And so there was a contribution on my part of helping him to find his own eloquence about how to tell that story. And so for me, I was kind of mentoring him in the writing, but he was also mentoring me in how to take what was, because my mind is, flying around the cosmos. And when I try to communicate with people, sometimes that's an obstacle that's difficult to bridge. And so he was able to understand where I'm coming from better than most, and then translate it in a way that was like, okay, he's saying this, and this is kind of what he's meaning, and this is what it's indicating. And I'd be like, yeah, that's pretty accurate. That's, and then Luann, who was sort of like almost a polar opposite as far as like, she's thinking about the practicalities of daily living and not really spending too much time out in the cosmos, but she's been exposed to it because her brother was this Hare Krishna who was very brilliant, and he was best friends with my brother, my brother and I introduced her brother to the Hare Krishnas way back in the day, because we're all vegetarians, and the Krishnas would have vegetarian feasts. And so she'd been exposed to these ideas of her brother and my brother talking about all of this wild stuff. And so she had been sort of exposed to it, but was still sort of like, I'm not up there with you guys. And so Lee was able to say, okay, this is what's going on. Here's the heads up on this is where he's trying to get your mind going. And he'd be able to put it in words that she would go, oh, well, put that in the book. I understand that. And so, it was like this. And I'm having this real struggle because I'm thinking I'm sounding perfectly fine. And she's going, I don't get it. You're not communicating to me. I'm like, well, why not? And he's like, okay, here, Rob, settle down here. So it turned out that we were really a well-balanced team to put together this book, which really has the power to help anybody that's facing challenges in their life. And those challenges can be extremely difficult, and you can get through it. You can make it. You can, there's paths that are laid out step by step. We took these nice rocks and laid them in the stream in a way that you can step across, barely getting your feet wet. And even fast moving, difficult waters to navigate, you're going to find a path that will help you. And it's going to be practical for anybody, because that's how this book shaped up. We realized as we went that this was this labor of love that did come out of need and spirit working through us, and using each of our talents and abilities together to bring forth something that neither one of us really could do without the other.
That's fascinating. I'm just looking, your relationship is Saturn to each other.
Is Saturn?
Is Saturn, right. You're Saturn to each other, which means you are both offering structure to each other. You're offering education to each other.
Right.
And you're setting boundaries for each other. And as a result, you're creating this model of the universe for people to benefit from. As teacher, you come together and you become a teacher, which is remarkable. And that is a mystic expression of life that I celebrate. So you've each in your I want you to, Lee, to just pick one traumatic event in your life that, if you had the book at the time that event took place, what would you draw out of the book now to go back to that earlier you and apply that wisdom in order for you to transit through that episode in your life?
Yeah, no, definitely. So during high school, when I had all this stuff happen to me, just kind of being around the wrong people and having low self-esteem, not knowing who I was. If I had this book back when I was even 12, that would have shaped my life to the point to say that even if I'm misunderstood, it only matters what you think about yourself and what your goals and dreams are for yourself. You don't have to fit anybody else's mold. And if some people in your life are continuously drawing you down, find new friends quickly. Just because you've known somebody for years doesn't mean that they're the right people in your life. A lot of times they're energy vampires. They just want to constantly just put you down and drain the life out of you. And they want to do whatever they can to make you look bad so that they look good. And, my parents, I had this friend that I mentioned in the book that he was just toxic as hell. And I would not be friends with him anymore. I probably would have, even before high school, just dropped him as a friend and just went and been friendless for a while until I found the right group of people in my life, because environment's huge. If you're not around the right people in your life, even if you know them for years, sometimes you just have to cut ties, because that would have dramatically helped boost my own confidence. This book might not have been written though, too, because it's only through that pain and that building myself up after grinding myself down into a fine powder, after being through all that crap that I went through, that this book was born. So you have to look at it as the positive side too, because I went through all that crap. I'm more driven than most people to transform my life, because I'm not satisfied with average. I want an extraordinary life. And that only comes through knowing what you want and putting yourself in a position to win, getting around the right people, and just continuously working on yourself. And that's also something that customer service taught me. It taught me, what are people going through? What are their problems? And I learned a lot about myself because I learned how to help other people, but I also learned my weaknesses because I wasn't very auditory as far as my skill set. I was very visual. So going from manual labor to customer service and having to really fine tune my listening and understand what people are going through, that took years to develop. But it also allowed me extreme growth that made me realize that, hey, customer service is not fun, but it's also one of my best teachers ever. And I also realized that if I can become somebody that's just like a diamond in the rough, a piece of coal, and then polish myself into a diamond and teach other people to be excellent at it and develop my leadership, then this book is something that I need to write.
So, when was the first time the idea of you writing a book pop into your mind?
It happened in my 20s, because after I developed a high degree of, customer resolution, working in escalations department, I'm thinking, yeah, I should write a book about customer service. But I never followed through on it because I never really believed in myself. I didn't really know how to put it together. So it kind of evolved over like ideas of, I should write a book about this and this. And people are like, yeah, you should stop talking about it and actually do it. But it's a lot easier to write a book when you have an accountability partner, even if they're not your co-author or anything like that. It's even better if you can learn to write with a co-author, because then I'm in that customer service aspect. I'm learning from them, they're learning from me, and we're helping each other.
So, how did you organize the accountability activity with each other? How did that work?
Well, we
What was your
started off
schedule?
since,
Regular meetings?
yeah, no, that's what we had to do because he was remote. He's in North Carolina, so we did Zoom, and we just like we would write, and we use Microsoft OneDrive. so we could both write and see what each other are writing at the same time. And you're like, yeah. And I'd be like, yeah, that sounds good. Or no, take that out, you know. But our original accountability was, let's write a minimum of 2 to 3 paragraphs a week. And let's meet on a Friday after I'm done with my work week. And then we would spend several hours on a Friday night, you know, going over things. But our accountability was, if we didn't write the minimum quota, we would transfer each other $1 on like Venmo or PayPal, just something to keep us going. And if we fouled up like 2 times in a row, you know, or 3 times in a row, then it'd be $5 and $10. We would slowly up the stakes to make it competitive and fun. But that also really formed the structure of how we wrote and developed the outline and so forth.
I love that. I know people are going to appreciate that. How
Oh
about
yeah.
you, Robin? What was your vision after you? When did you first? You say you wrote a poetry book earlier. When did you first have the idea? Hey, I can write a book. What was it about writing a book that? When did that idea pop into your mind?
Man, well, when I was young, we had a music group that was very successful. We played at the Troubadour in West Hollywood, where a lot of acts got their start, and we wowed them. We were the best act that month, that week. Then we went back and we were the best act that month, and then we were invited to be one of the 12 best acts of the year. And this was our family group. This was, all of us. We had 6 children in my family, and all of us, my younger brother played piano, I played guitar, my older brother played drums, and my 3 sisters all were a chorus and we all sang, but the sisters were a chorus with us. And so we had a fellow named Alex Plashert, who you may not know the name, but he was a choreographer and dancer that was right at the top of Hollywood, of the Hollywood pyramid of those who did choreography and dance. And he worked with us for a while.
When was this? What period?
This was, this was the late 60s, early 70s.
Okay.
And so we had all of that success in those areas. But once I got married, some years later, I got married, and when we had kids, my wife was like, "Oh, don't make so much noise," when I would try to practice music. So I was like, "Well, okay." So I started working on writing poetry because I just had this irrepressible thing in me. I had to be creating. And so I started writing poetry, and I began to take that poetry to poetry slams, which are kind of like, everybody bring a flower and we'll crush all the ones except the best one. Because that's what it felt like anyway. Because in a poetry slam, it's like, who's got the very best work, and everybody else gets voted out, So I was working very hard to make these poems as potent and powerful and beautiful as I could. And I began to win. I began to do very well in these poetry slams until I was actually getting invited to be a featured poet at different venues. And over the course of time, I think it was something like 78 pages of poems that I had written one a week, just as a discipline, because they had these poetry slams one a week. And every week I would write something, or 1 or 2 poems to bring in. And so I had 78 pages of poems that I just organized into a book. And that was the basis for a one-man show that I performed at a local church. And it was both music and poetry of my own for an hour. And it was beautiful. There was this woman that was called the Poet Laureate of Blowing Rock, North Carolina, named Juanita Tobin. And Juanita Tobin stood about 2/3 of the way through. There was a little lull in the program as I was arranging things, and she stood up in the midst of the congregation and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we are in the presence of genius." And after that show, my father came up to me and said, when you were growing up, I thought your little brother was really the thing, but I think you are. I was like, okay, thank you. So, so that was the first book that I wrote, and I had all of that success. And but there was a lot that I wanted to do from there, and I began writing various things, and then I got hit with all of this disaster. My I was riding on top of the world. I had a successful business. My wife had a successful business. We had 3 wonderful children that we were educating, and they were doing very well academically. And we had them in gymnastics and dance and theater and all of these things. And then my wife developed kidney failure, and she wasn't able to do as much, and I had to take more time off from work to sort of do more caretaking. And as that progressed over a 4-year period, it required more and more out of me, and she was able to do less and less, and because she was really struggling with this, and she wound up needing a kidney transplant, and so we went through this very difficult time, and eventually she died. And then very shortly thereafter, my middle son died. And this just, took me from feeling like I was on top of the world to feeling like I was carrying the weight of the world. And I was, it was difficult for me to just wake up. I couldn't really work because I had been barbering at that time. And when I would go into barber, all of I worked in a college town, and all of these kids that came in college age would remind me of my son, and I would start crying while I'm cutting their hair, and just I was unable to, I just was having a really hard time getting through all of that. And so that was sort of what I was facing. But I had all of these ideas for books that I wanted to write and things that I wanted to do. And I wrote another book that was in the midst of all of that, that really wasn't designed to be a good book. It was designed to be something that could help me uplift myself and get myself through this time that was too difficult to bear. And so it was a revelation of deep pain and deep healing, but it wasn't something that was very shareable, because it was just so much tragedy and so much pain mixed in with these jewels of beauty. And I may someday revise that book and release it for people, but it was too personal really to share with very many people. And so that was that was where I had gotten to, and I was digging myself out, and I lost my business, I lost my wife, I lost my son, I lost my business, I almost lost my house. My phone was cut off, and all these things. It was just a very dark moment in my life, but I had this concept in my mind that was like, well, I've always felt that God is real, and I've always felt a relationship to the divine that was just irrepressible. It just pours out of me. I can't help it. And I always felt like, well, I was very happy when I was well blessed and all things were going swimmingly in my life. Let me accept the pain that comes into my life with as much grace as all of those blessings. Let me accept this blessing too, because God turns everything into blessings when you allow God to do that. And so I said, just help me to accept this. I'm looking up going, are you sure? Seems like you've gone a little crazy here. But I accept it, because everyone has trouble in their life. We all lose loved ones. We all lose businesses. We all lose things, and it's a human condition. And to learn to accept it is a sort of a fundamental skill to being able to go on with living. And so it was very difficult to swallow, but I had to. And that was that was what I went through, and it was what I had to go through, and there wasn't a path around it. It was a dark night of the soul, but I came out of the other side really wanting to give some gifts to the world. And when I was offered the opportunity to give this gift with my friend Lee Reffel, I jumped at it. I knew that this was that I just had to do.
Thank you for sharing that from the very depths of your heart. When I read about the loss of your wife, and that it was like, wasn't just a sudden loss. It was like you almost lost her, and then you almost lost her, and then you almost lost her, and then you thought everything was going to be okay, and then you lose her, and
Yeah.
then your son 2 months later, or less than 2 months later, through suicide. No, through the accident. Your son was killed in an accident, correct?
Kind of an accidental suicide. There
An
was drugs and
accident.
alcohol involved, but I don't think it was an intentional thing.
Hmm.
But it could have been. It was hard to separate. It's hard to
Right.
sort out.
So I lost my stepson, my oldest son, through suicide when he was 33. So that was and that was in 2011. Here we are in 2023. So yes, that kind of pain really opens the soul. And
Mhm.
well, you
Yes.
just articulated that so beautifully. I'm hoping that whoever watches and listens to this, when we move to purchase the book, to get an even deeper resonance, because the purpose of my having this interview is to let human beings share their wisdom
Mhm.
for what it means to be a human being, so that other human beings who are feeling so isolated in their own suffering and their own trauma can recognize, well, if that guy made it out of that dark hole, that dark shadow, I guess I can too. And sometimes all they need is to hear somebody articulate how they did it, to give them permission and
Right.
show a way, or cast a spell in their mind that will shift the software that they're running,
Right.
that has them stuck in a bad movie, where they just keep rerunning
Right.
the tragedy again and again and again and again and again. And so I believe that these are moments of hope and enlightenment, literally, of turning on a light in the darkness of somebody's journey. And it took the two of you to come together and produce this amazing work, which truly it is. So tell me, Lee, what was your favorite story that Robin told in the book that got you so excited when you were working on it and you were struggling with it, but you said, God, we got to make this thing happen. This has got, we have to craft this so that it really has an impact that it needs to have.
That's a great question. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of stories I could relate of Robin's that are just mind blowing, like because of him being, the five of spades, or the uncontained, irrepressible energy, and very spiritual and soul like. One of them that actually came in the later part of the book, kind of halfway through writing it, was when he talks about he was with his girlfriend or friend at the time in North Carolina, and he talks about how he is talking about the spiritual wisdom to her, and she's not having it. She's a, well, can you do it? Can you do it? Can you dry, the sheets of, like wet soaking sheets that the Tibetan monks, it was a, what, Robin, what's the,
Gautama. Gautama meditation.
that's right, Gautama meditation. It's just at a loss, but Gautama meditation, where the monks take freezing, just damp pieces of clothing, and they put it on themselves, and through harnessing their energy, through the power of their body heat and mind, and the chi, the natural energy of the body, they can dry these wet pieces of clothes until they're completely dry, because they've mastered their mind and spirit and body all together. Well, anyway, he's telling her about this story or how the Tibetan monks do that. And she's all, unless you can do it, shut the hell up, basically. And he's like, you know what? Say no more. And he like starts, taking his jacket, puts it in the car, and then he's just basically down to like his shorts and a real thin t-shirt. And then she's like, wait a minute, what the hell are you doing? And then he like takes it to like this frozen creek. It's like 25 degrees in North Carolina. So it's very humid, bitter cold. And he takes it, dunks his shirt into the stream. And she's like, Robin, what the hell? You don't have to do this. Stop. And then she's like, is this wet? Robin, is this wet? He was just like, I'm going to prove you wrong no matter what it takes. And she's like, yes, oh my God, stop. You don't have to do this. He wrings out the shirt just enough, so it's not like to the point where you'll catch hypothermia or whatever, but he like puts his shirt on, it's freezing, it's crackling, because, of how cold it is, puts it on. And then she's just saying repeatedly, he's all, hey, you need to, if you want to talk, fine, but I cannot answer you back. I have got to concentrate. And so he's just harnesses energy, just generating a massive amount of heat to the point where eventually the shirt is completely dry after, so many minutes. Robin, how many minutes was it exactly?
It was probably about 22 minutes or so from the time I wriggled in soaking wet shirt. And I didn't squeeze it out. I just got it where it wasn't dripping completely wet.
Okay. So I was wrong, but it was still soaking wet.
Yeah. And it took about 22 minutes. I mean, steam was pouring off of me. And she just kind of shut up and watched Google-eyed, And she was like, wow, you're steaming like crazy. I'm like, I told you, I have to concentrate. So I just went back to generating chi. And about 22 minutes later, I'm wearing a dry shirt. I'm like, is it wet now? She touches, she's like, no, it's completely dry.
Yeah, thanks for elaborating on that. I didn't have all the details right, obviously, but that was by far one of my favorite stories, because that shows what the mind and body are capable of when everything's connected and you're in this Zen or Samadhi type of state. You can really just transform your life once you master your mindset. Is it easy? No. Does it take years and decades to do? Sometimes, but it's doable if you have the right belief and unwavering commitment to working on yourself, no matter what your goal is. Jesse, you're on mute. I think you accidentally muted yourself.
Thank you. So, Robin, what was your most inspired story that Lee told in the book?
Wow. Well, I have to go right to there was he went through a lot of difficulties in high school, and it had a really negative effect on him. And he got to the point where he'd been teased and poked fun at, just to the point where he was at the breaking point. And one day he sees these guys drive by, and they're pointing and laughing, and he just thinks they're mocking and making fun of me, and he flips him the bird. And this is a guy that he grew up with, that he knew the guy, he'd known him for years. They'd played sports together, but they'd had a little bit of a disagreement sometime earlier. And and they hadn't really been right for a few months. And so the guy who's driving the car, his friends are the ones that are laughing at him, but the guy who's driving the car screeches on the brakes, backs up, and jumps out of the car and says, "Did you just flip me off?" He's like, "Yeah, I did." He's like, "What did I ever do to you?" And so they exchange words, but they're already, there's already this ill will between them. And the guy just goes off on him and whacks him a good one and starts, going at it. And because he caught him off guard, Lee was caught off guard, and it dazed him, and the guy gets in several good punches, and now he's at a disadvantage, and he's trying to fight back. He manages to fight back some, but he's not effectively beating the guy. The guy's beating him, and this old man comes out of the house nearby and says, you know, what's going on here? You get out of here. What do you think you're doing? And chases the guy off, you know, and Lee is with his brother, and they're, you know, they see this fight happening, but everybody's got friends, and the friends are all like, oh, these guys got a beef with each other. My beef is not with a crowd, and we all kind of believe in a fair fight. Well, he had broken Lee's jaw, and his brother saw that, and he was like, oh no, that's not going to stand. And so they kind of run and half walk, half run to the guy's house, and his brother gets in a fight with the guy to sort of, you know, I'm not going to just let this go. And they battle it out, and his brother kind of gets, you know, the better of him for a little bit of the fight, and then finally it looks like it's going to turn into a gang assault, and they decide it's best to take off, so they get out of there. And when they get home, his mother sees that he's got a broken jaw. They get him to the hospital, and she takes out a restraining order on this other kid, and it puts him in a position where for the whole rest of that summer, there's this tension that this thing could erupt again, and he could be further, there could be further consequences that could be very adverse. And so he has to go through this difficulty and face these trials that are extreme for him. And as he's going through all of these extreme trials, he has his jaw wired shut for quite a while, and it's just, it's this very intense story of all of these difficulties and troubles that all came to a head in this moment, and how that impacted his own self-concept. He'd really gotten beaten badly in this fight, and he had been picked on for years. And so now he's having a hard time being able to believe that he's capable of standing up for himself and looking after himself. And he's fearful, and he's like, now, so this affects many aspects of his life, and it transforms his life gradually over years, where he begins to learn karate sometime later, taekwondo karate, and that teaches him how to be able to fight and to be able to defend himself and to be a person of consequence that you don't want to pick a fight with. But his journey from this little kid that was being picked on to somebody who really is a person of consequence that you don't want to pick on is told in this book. And it's a powerful journey and very powerful story, very well told. And so for me, that's the story of all of it. And there's a lot of stories. I mean, Lee has many stories in this book, as do I, but that's one that I found most powerful and most meaningful.
Well, thank you for sharing that. This mild-mannered Lee Reffel is a dangerous weapon.
That's right.
Are you walking around with a warning sign? Don't mess with me, Lee?
Not at all.
What did you learn from that event, Lee, looking back?
Well, when I was mentioning, hanging around the right people, this fight was pretty much started by the guy that I grew up with, because there was just a disagreement. Without going into too many details, by the time the word got back to him from my frenemy's big mouth, it put the tension between us. Not the dude that said it, because he never got in a fight with him, but he pretty much exacerbated all this stuff to the point where it was never right again. You know, even if we wouldn't have gotten in a fight right then, who's to say that it wouldn't have happened down the road? And who's to say that, you know, couldn't have happened between my brother and him or whatever? But that goes to show you that if you have the wrong people in your life, even if you think they're your friend, you have to really evaluate who's in your corner. Sometimes people that you know for a couple of years will be the best friends you've ever had compared to somebody that has known you for at least 10, 15 years and they could be the worst piece of shit on the planet. So I may say that in a bitter tone, but I believe also that what it's done for me is to realize that it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks about you. It's really your self concept of yourself. Because if you learn to love yourself, then others are going to see that energy and they're going to be like, wow, somebody's, you know, confident, even if they're soft spoken or something, which I am soft spoken. It's taken me years to even kind of go from introverted to being able to do an interview because that's not my personality. That's not my nature. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that I've learned a lot about self development through this because when you're at your lowest point in your life, to the point where you feel like suicidal and you can't see it getting any better, that's usually where you have to be before you get disgusted enough to actually make the changes, regardless of what happens to you in life.
So was it difficult for the two of you to rehash these traumatic events in your life? How did that go?
Oh my God. It was very difficult because when you read those stories and you as men, we like to suppress stuff more than women. We're just not as, you know, open to sharing our vulnerabilities like women do. Women will cry on each other and hug each other and talk and talk and talk. And I'm not saying that to be sexist or anything like that. I'm just saying, you know, men are from Mars, women are from Venus, you know? So we have our different types of ways of healing. But to be able to take suppressed emotions that I just wanted to forget, that shattered my confidence and my self concept of myself, and to relive that and retell it in front of my entire family, they're like, I never knew you went through that. You never told me. It's like, because I didn't want to talk about it. But it was even hard for me to talk about that because Robin's like, man, you've got to put that in the book. And I'm like, no, man. He's like, yeah, you've got to put that in the book. You've got to put your pain there. And then after I tell my pain, he's inspired by his own pain. He's like, Luann's like, man, you got to talk about some of the stuff you went through too, because a lot of people are going to relate to these extreme difficulties that both of you are going through. So you have to be able to, you know, dig deep. And there's a lot of times when you're reading the story, you get all emotional and you start crying and you're like, wow. But then other people feel it too. And, you know, when they start tearing up, you know, you have a good story.
How about you, Robin? How difficult was for you to rehash it? You got to unmute yourself here.
Yeah, it was it was it was one of the most difficult things I can imagine doing willingly. Because to go through events that are extremely difficult, very painful, and very challenging is something everyone has to do at some point in their life. But to take those stories and to tell them effectively meant that I had to go back to those places where it was a lowest point in my life. These moments that each of us had to overcome, and for me, it was I went to a place that was so deep and dark and painful that it was, you know, I wasn't sure I could come out the other side, and I wasn't sure I would make it. And then I had to go back to that place and find myself deep in that dark pain and go, okay, how did I manage to get through that? And what are the skills that I can take from that and offer to someone so that if that's where they find themselves, if their heart is broken and their mind is in tatters and they're struggling to just get through the next breath, to take one more step, how can I help that person from being at that place, because that's where I was, to get going and to be able to continue to go on and to lift themselves up and to find their way into a life that matters again, a life that is useful again, a life where they can see that it is a positive thing to live. It is a wonderful blessing to have life. How can I get them to this place out of this extremely dark and painful moment that I had to go through? How can I share that in a way that they're going to feel liberated from the pain that they're facing? And that's what it was for me to do. And so there was nothing easy about that at all. It's not something that I willingly wanted to do. And it's like Lee said, when he had shared some of these moments in his life, he's like, "What about you?" I'm like, "Okay, I'll do it." And it was, that's the kind of pain and suffering that I had to recreate. And that was, it was tremendous, because it was so liberating to go through it twice, in a way, to go through these very difficult experiences again, in order to be able to share, well, this is what you do. This is how you get past that. This is how you structure your thinking. This is how you structure your life. This is steps you can take that will allow you to master the difficulties you're facing in a way that you're going to be free of them. And I had to build that structure out of my pain and my suffering, so to help others with their pain and their suffering. It was a tremendous difficulty. It really was challenging.
So what is one thing anyone can do that will bring them practical value right now, today, if they're struggling with trauma and past difficulties?
There's a chapter in the book called the positivity principle. And the positivity principle has been written about a lot, but what it is kind of to assume everything. It's just assuming a positive state of mind that says, no matter what I'm facing, no matter what the difficulty is, no matter what challenges I'm up against now, I know it's gonna work out all right. And I know it's gonna be fine. And even when you're, especially when that doesn't seem very true for you, especially in those moments, it's important to go ahead and introduce those thoughts to your mind, because your subconscious mind can't tell the difference between an imagined reality and reality. If you imagine something vividly, your subconscious mind is going to accept that. So what you need to do then, if you have only one thing that I could say, well, do this, it's going to help the most of anything that you could do in these really difficult moments. It's adopt the concept as though it's your new baby and you love it dearly and you're going to take care of it. Everything's going to work out fine. I believe that everything's going to work out fine. I believe I'm going to find my way through this. I just know it. And you keep telling yourself, I just know it's going to be fine. I know there's some purpose to this. I know I'm going to find my way through this. I know there's a beautiful life waiting. I know it. I just know it. And this is a positivity principle that you inculcate and introduce into yourself through repeating it and repeating it and repeating it. And after a while, it begins to become true. And you find that beautiful things, you notice the beautiful things. When you're in this deep, dark place, it's hard to notice that there's beauty around you because you're not focused on it. So you learn to practice focusing. If there's any beauty, I'm going to find it. If there's anything great or good, it's not going to get past me. I'm going to notice that. And when you make those habits, this positivity, a part of who you are as a person, then you're going to find your life moving in a direction that will bless you. And it doesn't matter what circumstances you're facing now. If you adopt this positivity principle as your prevailing mental attitude, you're all right. It's going to work out. You'll find that this is true.
Oh,
I'm
thank
going to
you.
add to that as well, because what Robin says is absolutely right. You have to develop these habits of speaking in a way that reflects what you want instead of what you've been through. Because if we're stuck in a bad movie or bad scene of the movie and we keep replaying it, there's got to be some point where you break the cycle. You're like, enough is enough. I know that I'm meant for better, and I can achieve a lot of great things if I really work on myself and if I really believe in the positivity principles of what can I contribute who I am, what can I help others with? Because it's not just about working on yourself. When you work on yourself and you become the best version of yourself, you can really inspire others to work on themselves. A lot of people won't listen to what they say, but they'll follow our example when they see us transform. For me, it was the chapter Turning Pain into Gain, chapter 16, because I talk about just, learning Taekwondo, and I've been in it for a while, and I'm very interested in martial arts and so forth. But the thing that martial arts teaches you is not so much like how to, hurt someone. That's not what it's about. It's about developing your full potential through your mindset, through mind and body connection. That's the beauty of martial arts, period, or combat sports, period. But you learn to turn your painful moments into things that transform your life, whether you're going through a divorce, whether you're going through loss of a child or extreme trauma, no matter what it is. It's kind of asking yourself, okay, if I'm going to change my life and transform myself into the person I'm meant to be, how can I use everything I've been through and turn it into equity? What can I do to help people out? Because, it's learning to kind of turn your mess into your message, turn your pain into, as my friend Camille Dixon says, turn your pain into profit. You have to learn to capitalize on what you've been through. So in that chapter, I talk about reaching out to other people too. If you feel like suicidal or whatever, you need to reach out, because you may think that there's nobody that cares, or people say that they don't care, whatever. You can turn to anybody. You can turn to, sometimes a stranger are some of your best people because they're unbiased towards you. You can go into a church and be like, this is what I've been through. And then they can offer you a unbiased perspective. But my point is that if you can learn to just trust yourself, to put yourself out there, even if you're vulnerable, even if you feel like no one gets you, if you're willing to do it, there is somebody that will get you. And there's somebody, you can make a lot of great friendships through sharing your trials and traumas, because generally people are good people and they want to help each other out through these type of circumstances. Like, oh my God, you've been through that? Well, let me see what I can do to help you. Reach out for help no matter what. Don't give up on yourself. Keep going.
Oh, that's beautiful. So tell me, what is the reason somebody should pick your book instead of somebody else's book if they're going to go buy a self-help book right now?
I think it's just basically Robin's got his mic muted, but I'm going to toss this off to Robin here pretty quickly. But for me personally, if you're willing to be very raw and authentic, like we have been in this book, it'll show people that, hey, we're all imperfect. We're all full of flaws, and we do stuff unintentionally. And we get ourselves in these situations, sometimes, without even realizing it. But through these stories, it's not just about trauma, it's not just about hardship. We talk about, in the end, say, because there's 3 parts to the book. There's early childhood trauma, section of it. I'm not going to reveal the section names, but then it talks about the dark night of the soul. And then the 3rd part of the book is like, okay, you've seen what we've been through. Now look at what you can do if you really take your pain and really harness it and turn it into what it's meant to be used for, to help other people. And that's what we describe. And we describe it through other people's stories as well. So that's my point on it. Robin?
Well, I think the thing that this book offers is that it's going to be much more comprehensive than a lot of books that you'll come across, because we don't just teach mind dynamics. There's information in this book about practical exercises that you can do, but it's more than that. There's information in this book about what superfoods specifically enhance brain function and enhance metabolism and enhance your ability to function and your ability to think. There's information in this book that people don't really understand very well, the processes of manifestation, because there's some quantum physics involved that really you sort of have to get a grasp on to sort of dig into that in a way that makes you effective when you're trying to manifest things. Well, this book has those dynamics broken down in a way that anyone is going to be able to go, oh yeah, now I get it. I've been hearing about this, and I understand there's this whole quantum thing going on, but what that is, I never knew until right now. Now I'm seeing that's something I can do. And oh, this is going to help. And oh, that's how you do that. Oh, that's the missing ingredient. There's things, because we're not just doing research and saying, this is what we've discovered. The research that we've done is stuff that I've been applying for years. Lee has been learning through his work for years. And as we've applied it, we see, oh, there's this very practical route that you can follow that we tell. And the other thing about it is it's told in a way that kind of carries you along, so you don't even realize you're going through a learning experience. It just sounds like you're listening to these really heartfelt and kind of astounding and kind of challenging stories about the lives of these two individuals, Lee Reffel and Robin Austin. And we tell these powerful stories in powerful ways that sort of keep you engaged and keep you, well, I want to know what happens. Oh my gosh, this happened, and then this happened, and this happened. Now I really want to know what happened. And at the end you go, holy smokes, I really learned something valuable I didn't even realize I was learning. And that's something that you'll get from this book that you're probably not going to find in your average day-to-day, oh, here's another self-help book. It's not like that. This is a unique experience that I hope people will find for themselves. And each reader is going to have a different experience because it's going to evoke the feelings and the understanding that they have from their own background, past history, and understanding that will allow them to have a unique perspective on what they can do in their own lives that you just don't get in most books, but you'll find it here.
That's beautiful. That's how I felt when I was reading the book. I just felt this is a special exposition of wisdom that comes from the heart, and I'm going to continue to recommend it to others. So a couple of final questions here. Both of you describe throughout the book a shift in consciousness and expansion of awareness of your being and the power available to you. So I'll ask each of you, can you tell me first, what is your concept of God or the source, whatever it is, that this present moment in your life? Just go for it. You got people here that, there are millions of people that are very confused about the source of power in their lives. So you both have created lives of remarkable value. You're in healthy personal relationships. You've had children. You've overcome tremendous adversity. And that's my definition of success, that you're maintaining harmony and creating joy in your life and the lives of others. So the question I'm asking you is, can you each talk to me and tell me about your concept of God one at a time? Yeah. Robin, why don't you go first?
Okay. I think that the concept of God is something that, you have all these different approaches and all these different ideas in all these different religions, but each of them, if you're talking about God, has to have three fundamental things. If God doesn't have these three fundamental things, then you're not really talking about God, you're talking about something else. The three fundamental things are omniscient, because God has to know everything, or God can't deal with whatever God doesn't know. So God has to have omniscience, has to be aware of the entire universe and every detail, or that's not God. Second is omnipotent. Can't just know, has to be able to act under any circumstances, no matter what, or that's not God. If that being, whatever it is, can't do anything about what's going on, and it's like, well, that's outside my venue, that's not God. Has to be omnipotent. And in order for that to happen, God must be omnipresent. And that is everywhere present. There can't be any place in any universe where that being is not. Because in that place, in that universe, then that being couldn't be omnipotent or omniscient. It couldn't have any effect. So God has to have omnipotence, omniscience, and omnipresence. And so however you want to think of God. I remember one time I walked into a church and I just was hitchhiking around and was like, I need to get a ride. I see this church. I walk in and I walk up to the altar. And as I'm going, this guy sort of jumps in front of me, this priest. He's like, where are you going? I'm like, well, I'm going to pray. He's like, to who? I'm like, to God. He's like, to what God? I'm like, well, there's only one God. He says, oh, no. There are many gods. What God are you going to pray to? And I was like, oh, okay. Well, in that case, I'm going to pray to the God of very gods, the God above all other gods, the God to whom all gods must bow, because this is the very God of very gods, who is omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent, and without whom nothing can happen that this God is unaware of and unable to stop. The very God of that's the God that I'm going to pray to. And he was like, okay, kind of moved out of my way. And I walked up and knelt at the altar, and I said, dear God, I'm, in kind of a fix here. I'm going to need a ride, and I'm going to need to get to where I need to go. I'd appreciate your help. Thank you very much. And when I pray, I always remember there's this rule about prayer that I got from the writings that I've read, which is when you pray, believe that you receive it and you shall have it. So when I pray, I generally have this very self-assured thing that sort of goes, well, if I believe that I receive it, then I've already got it. So when I pray, I'm sort of like, can you give me this? Wow, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. And then now I don't have to worry about it again. I don't have to keep on praying and keep on begging and keep on asking, because when I pray, I believe that I receive it. Well, that means that at this point, if I've just prayed about it, it's time to start saying thank you, because I just received whatever it was that I was after. So thank you, God, for this magnificent blessing that you've given me of all of these people that are hearing this and going, hey, this changed my life. Hey, this book was amazing for me. These are the blessings that I hope for, that I aspire to as I'm writing this book. And then as it's released to the world, then it's like, for me, the greatest task that I can do is to just give thanks. I'm so grateful, whoever you are and wherever you are, for however God uses this book or whatever God uses to bless your life. I'm so grateful, because your life is blessed. This I believe and know, because that God that I'm talking about is omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent. That means they're right there in your life right now, and they are having an effect. And that God is transforming your life, whether you realize it or not, whether you believe it or not, whether you know it or not. I know it, because when I pray, I believe that I receive it. And I'm praying for you right now that everything is going to work out in a way that's just wonderful. So please, just, if you will, it's up to you, of course. I mean, the angels are very polite. They don't storm in and go, you're going to do it my way. Not at all. They wait and stand and wait until they're invited, and then they will bless you magnificently. So I offer you this blessing from my heart, from the God that I know, that says, I've already prayed, God has already blessed you, just accept it, and you will find that things will transform in your life. And that's how it works. So I pray that you'll be able to find something to accept in your life that is a special blessing from God for you, because God loves you. And that the main thing that God wants me to let you know, as far as I can tell, because the real effect that we have in life is the waves that come out of our being. Our soul is a force that is emanating all the time. So if we're emanating the most divine principle and the most divine beauty and the most divinity that we can, then that's the greatest blessing that we can be. And that's really the effect. That's our legacy, is whatever we've been thinking and doing and acting, the energies that come through us. That's the legacy that we leave the world. So I pray and hope that God will bless you through this activity and through my emanations of my own soul, which I surrender to God wholeheartedly, withholding nothing, that it may be so when I pray that God does answer that. Amen.
Amen, brother. How about you, Lee?
Wow. How can I compete with that? No, I'm not trying to compete, but that was awesome, Robin.
Thank you.
To echo onto that is that God is within us if we learn to quiet ourselves, turn inward. In other words, when we learn to really trust ourselves, we're trusting God. When we learn to take, the advice from others, but not as an absolute truth. We have to draw our own conclusion from what's being told to us. Yeah, there's times where we have to rely on the wisdom of others, but there's also time where we have to make our own judgment as to whether that advice is truly what God wants for us. So to be able to turn within and quiet the mind, go into those brainwave patterns that really connect us with God, because we have gamma, beta, delta, theta, and alpha. Well, the more we can lower our brain waves and get into a almost trance-like, dreamlike state, that's where all of our power and wisdom is. It's within and shutting off the overactive critical mind and turning to the godlike, inner knowing, Zen-like mind that comes through years of practice. I'm still practicing meditation, but I've learned a lot about lowering my brain waves. And that's like right when you go to sleep, that's like, there's where my keys are. Because like you're in your knowing mind. Even if it's at 3 a.m. in the morning, you're just like, because the wisdom truly is going into that deeper state of mind. So being able to make a regular practice of going inward, breathing, relaxing, even bodily stuff like stretching has been shown to do wonders for not only your physical health, but your mental health, and, it can relate to spiritual health. Being able to just relax your body and mind, because they're both interconnected. And what connects you to the spiritual world too. If you learn to really harness your mindset and turn within to get the answers to life. And sometimes that's through journaling, sometimes it's meditation, and sometimes it might just be recording your own voice, just saying, hey, why am I so strong with everything that I've been through in my life? Kind of just, answering, asking yourself a question and answering it. And a combination of making statements, say, I'm so strong because I've been through this and I overcame this. And what's my purpose, So being able to write down stuff to reprogram your mind through repetition, daily repetition, to be able to say, you know what, this is how I thought in the past, but it's only a fraction of my potential. It's only a fraction of the wisdom that's the, storehouse of my universe. I have everything I need to succeed. I just need to turn inward. And if I need to ask for guidance from others, so be it. Then I turn inward again and say, does that resonate with what's my path? Does that resonate with who I am? And you're constantly evaluating and judging things, but from a very calm, believing perspective. And if somebody else's advice resonates for you, well, maybe that's God taking that person and putting them in your life for that very reason, so that you can find your path. So turning inward is critical.
That's beautiful. So, gentlemen, this has been an amazing visit together. And I hope that once we get it out here, it's going to have a powerful effect on promoting your book and opening up the lives of millions of people so that they can enjoy and share their gifts with others. How can people connect with you guys and order your book?
So people can connect with us in various ways. On Facebook, it's the Software of Your Mind. Software of Your Mind. That's where the Facebook group is. We also have a website, thesoftwareofyourmind.com, which has a link to the book itself, but it also has 2 free gifts just by going to the website. And Robin, can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. We put together a little mini manual of manifestation for those that just want to take a little step, put a toe in the water to understand some of the something about what some of the fundamental ways that you can change your life right now rapidly. It's a little mini book. It's very quick read. It's downloadable for free. Just put in your email address so that we can follow up with you. And but there's that, and then there's quotes from our book, The Software of Your Mind: How Changing Your State of Mind Changes Everything. Because we found that the authors that we did research from had these pithy, beautiful little phrases, and we incorporated those into the book. And so that also is a way that you can sort of have a sampler, have a little taste of what you're going to get when you decide to actually purchase the book. And when you do purchase the book, you're going to find that it really is transformative. It really is something that can make a huge difference in your life. But whether you do or not is entirely up to you. We'd like to offer you the free gifts just for checking it out, just for coming and looking at the website, just for coming and seeing what it is that we're offering. And you get a little free sample that is actually quite valuable in itself. This little mini manifestation manual gives you, in a nutshell, a very step-by-step way that you can take whatever it is that your heart desires and bring it from within your heart into your world. And so that's our free gift to you. Come and get it. No obligation, no cost. And that's just a love offering for those that are interested enough to come and see us at thesoftwareofyourmind.com.
That's terrific. Thank you both so much. It's been a pleasure and an honor, and I look forward to speaking to you again.
Absolutely.
And with that, thank you everybody for watching and listening, and may you all change your state of mind and change everything with The Software of Your Mind by Lee Reffel and Robin Austin. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jesse. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Jesse.